All right, today we're going to talk about a real hidden gem from the history of math, Hilbert's epsilon. You've probably never heard of it, but it's this single, super elegant symbol that was born from one of the most ambitious projects you can possibly imagine in logic. I'm talking about an attempt to put all of mathematics on a foundation that could never, ever be shaken.
So let me ask you this. What if you could replace the whole complex language of logic, all those phrases like for all this and there exists that, with just a single powerful symbol? I mean, really think about that. Boiling down the entire vocabulary of mathematical proofs into one simple, streamlined operator. That was the dream, and it kicked off this quest for a totally new kind of logic.
Okay, so our first section is all about building a logic without quantifiers. You might be wondering how in the world you even start simplifying the language of a mathematical proof. Well, Hilbert's answer was pretty direct. You start by tearing down its most common and, frankly, most complicated parts.
So, picture this. It's the early 20th century, and this brilliant mathematician, David Hilbert, has this idea for a new way to build logic. His goal? He wanted a system that was way more direct and streamlined. See, back then, logic was all about these things called quantifiers. Hilbert wondered, what if we just got rid of them completely? He wanted proofs to be finitary, which is just a fancy way of saying they should be concrete, almost mechanical. Like you could check them in a set number of steps, no weird abstract infinite concepts allowed. He figured if you could do that, proving the whole system was rock solid and consistent would be a whole lot easier.
And this brings us to the star of our show. To pull this whole thing off, Hilbert had to invent a brand new piece of logical machinery. It's time to meet the epsilon operator. So what is this thing? Well, technically, it's called a term-forming operator. In plain English, its whole job is to take a logical statement and create a term from it, like a specific concrete object. This lets you stop talking about objects in general and just point to one. It was designed to completely replace those standard quantifiers we use in predicate logic. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. The old way, the way we still do it, uses two symbols, that upside-down A for all, and the backwards E for there exists. Hilbert's new way, just one symbol, epsilon. It gets rid of both of them. I mean, that's a huge simplification, right? At least on the surface. But how does it actually work? Well, the magic behind this little symbol is something called a choice function. It's a really clever, simple two-step process for picking an object that matches whatever you're looking for. Okay, so here's how it works. Step 1, find a match. Let's say you have a formula, a of x. The epsilon term, epsilon a of x, goes out and finds an object x that makes that formula true. Simple enough. But here's where it gets really clever. Step 2, pick a default. What happens if no such object exists? Like if your formula is a number that's both even and odd. The function doesn't just crash. Nope. It simply picks a unique, totally arbitrary object from the universe to be the default. And that's the genius of it. It always gives you an answer, which is absolutely crucial if you're trying to build a system that never breaks. Okay, so we have this really elegant new tool, but you gotta ask, why go to all this trouble? The epsilon operator wasn't just some neat little academic exercise. No way. It was a critical piece of one of the most ambitious intellectual projects of the entire 20th century, Hilbert's grand plan. This was Hilbert's program, and you have to understand at the time, people were finding these weird paradoxes that were shaking the very foundations of mathematics. It was a crisis. Hilbert wanted to end all that uncertainty. His plan was basically to formalize all of classical math into these strict axiomatic systems, and then use his finitary proofs to show they were consistent, that they could never lead to a contradiction. He wanted to put math on an unshakably firm foundation once and for all. And the epsilon calculus was right at the heart of this whole endeavor. It was, and I'm quoting here, a main innovation in his program. This new quantifier-free logic was the engine that Hilbert was betting on to finally deliver that proof of absolute consistency for all of mathematics. Okay, so if you're going to build a whole new system of logic, you have to prove it's actually up to the job, right? To do that, Hilbert and his colleagues established two major results, which we now call the epsilon theorems. First up, number 1. This was basically the proof of concept. The first epsilon theorem was a huge result that proved the epsilon calculus itself was internally consistent. That it didn't just contradict itself and fall apart. An absolutely crucial first step. All right, and now for number 2.
The second epsilon theorem established something called eliminability. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but what it means is incredibly important for understanding why the epsilon operator was so powerful.
So what does eliminability even mean? It means that any formula you can prove using the epsilon calculus can also be proven in standard logic without the epsilon symbol. This was huge. It meant Hilbert's system wasn't some weird alien logic that lived in its own universe. It was just as powerful as the original. It was a legitimate replacement, not just some strange alternative.
So, with these powerful theorems in hand, it really looked like Hilbert's grand plan was on the home stretch. But, as you might have guessed, history and logic had a massive plot twist waiting right around the corner. This leads us to our final section, an unfinished revolution. Because Hilbert's grand plan was about to hit a brick wall, and that wall was named Kurt Gödel. His famous incompleteness theorems proved that for any formal system powerful enough to do basic arithmetic, it's impossible for that system to prove its own consistency. That just struck a devastating, fatal blow to the ultimate goal of Hilbert's program.
So, what's the legacy of this thing? Well, as you can see here, it's a story of strengths and challenges. On the one hand, it's this brilliant idea that replaces two symbols with one. It's a powerful tool for consistency proofs, and it became the foundation for other important theorems. But on the other hand, its biggest goal was limited by Gödel's theorems, it's been hampered by a lack of really good proof systems, and honestly, there just aren't a lot of easy-to-understand explanations of it out there.
So where does that leave the epsilon calculus today? Well, it never became the new standard for logic that Hilbert dreamed of. Instead, it's still this powerful, fascinating tool used by specialists. It's a testament to a grand vision for math, and believe it or not, researchers are still exploring its potential today. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. In a world that's increasingly run on formal logic, I'm talking about everything from AI to the software on your phone, you just have to wonder, could this forgotten symbol, born from this incredibly grand ambition, still have some secrets to unlock for us in logic and in computing?